Why did Maester Aemon go to the wall? The official reason we're told seems a little off, so was there something else going on? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. If you like theories, background, history and lore about A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher, this is the place for you. Welcome. Maester Aemon Targaryen is rare in many ways, one of which is that he chose to go to the wall while still a relatively young man. He wanted to be there. Perhaps that wouldn't have been such a noticeable thing years earlier when it was still seen as a noble calling by many, but by his time the Night's Watch was increasingly populated by prisoners emptied out from the Red Keep, nobles and knights who found themselves on the losing side of a war or a scandal, and so on. Those who did still choose the Night's Watch were probably either older men who could rise no more, like Jeor Mormont, or younger men with limited life chances seeking to find glory elsewhere, like the bastard Jon Snow or the youngest son Waymar Royce. Aemon was not like that. He was 35. His brother had just been crowned king. He could have stayed with his family in King's Landing and lived comfortably as Grand Maester, Hand of the King, or just a member of the royal household. He could have gone back to the Citadel or taken his pick of other noble houses to serve as Maester. Instead, he chose to go to the wall and stayed there, slowly fading from everyone's memory for the next 6.5 decades. Why? The closest we get to an official explanation comes from Lord Commander Mormont when he tells Jon about Aemon's background. Mormont knew Aemon well, having been with him at the wall for a decade and a half or more, and so presumably this is what Aemon told him. 233. That was the year of the Great Council, Jon said. The lords passed over Prince Aerian's infant son and Prince Daeron's daughter and gave the crown to Aegon. Yes and no, says Mormont. First, they offered it quietly to Aemon, and quietly he refused. The gods meant for him to serve, not to rule, he told them. He had sworn a vow and would not break it, though the High Septon himself offered to absolve him. Well, no sane man wanted any blood of Aerian's on the throne, and Daeron's girl was a lackwit, besides being female, so they had no choice but to turn to Aemon's younger brother. Aegon, the fifth of his name, Aegon the Unlikely, they called him, born the fourth son of a fourth son. Aemon knew, and rightly, that if he remained at court, those who disliked his brother's rule would seek to use him, so he came to the wall. And here he has remained, while his brother and his brother's son and his son each reigned and died in turn. So that's the reason Aemon gave. If he had stayed in King's Landing, he would be used by an opponent of his brother, the new king. And on the surface, this makes sense. Aemon clearly loved his little brother Egg and didn't want to be a distraction or a potential rallying point for opponents. And King Aegon V had many opponents. If Aemon went to the wall, people would forget him, and that threat would be taken away. And people did forget about Aemon at the wall. Jon had been taught well by Maester Luwin and spent months with Maester Aemon without knowing who he was. Robert Baratheon, 15 years earlier, had wanted to kill every Targaryen possible, but had either forgotten or didn't know about Aemon on the wall. Aemon's reasons given to Jeor Mormont seem legitimate, and clearly they made sense to sensible people like Jeor Mormont, so why am I asking if there was something else going on? Because how could Aemon be used by Egg's opponents? They could hardly rally behind him as an alternative king. He had already refused the crown, or to break his maester's vows, and everyone knew that Aemon loved his brother and would never betray him. He wasn't exactly the ideal candidate to start a rival camp in support of. And Aemon would have been useful for Egg, who had not grown up thinking he would rule, so hadn't trained for it. Aemon was wise and well-read and had spent a decade or more as Maester to Daeron when he was heir to the throne, so will have known what it all involved. And he was loyal and family and a friend. Egg wanted him there at a time when he had few of any of that. In that context, Aemon saying he wouldn't stay to help out because maybe others might use him to get at Egg seems a little weak. Actually, that whole trip up to the wall seems a little odd. Aegon had just ascended to the throne unpopular with the ruling lords. He had sent the long-standing Hand of the King Bloodraven to the wall. Aemon, his last remaining brother, goes too, and he sends his best friend and protector Dunk up in the boat with them to Eastwatch. That's a round trip of at least a month, at a time when Egg most needed friends and family around him. By the way, this video is sponsored by Daedalak and GameExcite. A new resource management video game is out soon with Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown releases on the 18th of February on PC, PS5, Xbox Series S, X, and Nintendo Switch 2. There's a link in the description. It's based around what-if scenarios. What if the USS Voyager started utilising all that Borg technology? That kind of thing. You are in command of the Voyager, stranded in the Delta Quadrant, and you need to bring her back home. It's a story-driven survival strategy game with some roguelike elements set in the Star Trek universe, and I genuinely think it looks really good. In particular, you will find yourself managing resources on board ship, repairing damaged rooms, restoring systems and configuring the layout of the ship, that kind of thing. As well as managing the crew, who to send on away missions and who to keep on board, and of course exploring strange new worlds. Choices have consequences in this game. Characters live and die because of your decisions. Enemy ships will be engaged, unknown planets explored, and hopefully you will be able to bring the Voyager back home. Will you do it by careful strategic resource management or a more direct approach? It's up to you. As I said, please do check out the link in the description. Anyway, when Aemon himself tells the story of why he joined the Night's Watch, the language he uses is a little different from what we heard before. I was 35 and had been a Maester of the Chain for 16 years. Egg wanted me to help him rule, but I knew my place was here. So Egg had wanted Aemon to stay, and Aemon had refused, not because others might use him against Egg, but because he thought his place was at the wall. An interesting choice of words. Like everyone had their assigned task and role, and Aemon's was to be at the wall. Why? Well, he believed the Targaryens had a prophetically important role via the prince that was promised to help save humanity. He didn't think he himself was the prince that was promised, but as a servant, he had to play his role. And what role was that? Study, understanding prophecies and the like, and advise the Targaryen rulers from afar. Aemon had spent the last couple of decades with access to the greatest libraries in the land. Old Town, King's Landing, Dragonstone, but there was one place with a vast library most never even thought about. Here is Sam, who knows a thing or two about libraries, talking to John. Maester Aemon sent me to find maps for the Lord Commander. I never thought... John, the books. Have you ever seen their like? There are thousands. John gazed about him. The library at Winterfell has more than 100. Winterfell was the capital of the north and home to one of the oldest families. Their library had more than 100 books. Castle Black had many times that. And they were old books and rare books, books that had survived book burnings because no one thinks to look at the wall. We know they have information there about the Children of the Forest, scrolls from old Valyria, and a book by Septon Bath whose books were all destroyed during Baelor the Blessed's reign, or most of them were, it would appear. Rare finds. And Bloodraven would be there, a magical and prophetically inclined Targaryen if ever there was one. And he was nearly 60 when he went to the wall, so how much longer would he have? And there is one other thing that might have made all this seem all the more urgent to Aemon. Winter had come. Aemon will surely have been aware of Aegon's prophecy, as we saw in House of the Dragon. Perhaps it won't be exactly like that in the books, and perhaps Aemon will only know a part of it, but that pretty clearly talks about winter and the cold coming out of the north, heralding the return of the others. We're told that the inclusion of that prophecy did get George R. R. Martin's approval. And when Egg became king and Aemon went to the wall, we're told that it was in the midst of a winter that had lasted 3 years and showed no signs of abating. It would continue for another 3 years, the longest winter in living memory. It's beyond the scope of this video, but a long, hard winter always seems to send the more prophecy-centred Targaryens into overdrive, as if they fear the end may truly be nigh. I've speculated in another video that Bloodraven going to the wall may not have been just about a punishment for killing Aenys Blackfyre, a clue there being the fact that he was allowed to take the Targaryen family's only remaining Valyrian steel sword up to the wall with him, an odd thing to allow someone with a reason to dislike you and a history of breaking their vows. Had he achieved all he wanted in the south, getting the right bloodline on the throne from his perspective, then headed to the wall because he thought that was where the real action was going to happen from then on? It seems possible. And might something similar be the case with Aemon? Might him going to the wall not actually be just self-sacrifice, but a prophecy-driven, coordinated attempt with Bloodraven to bring the Night's Watch and the wall back to its original purpose, to defend the realms of men against the others? There were 10,000 there when Aegon invaded, and he clearly thought that was enough to act as a first line of defence, but now, with most of the castles abandoned and perhaps only 1,000 Night's Watchmen left, and many of them hardly of high moral character, perhaps it was time for a renewal there, particularly as winter had come. Read how Aemon describes his journey north. Egg sent me north aboard the Golden Dragon, and insisted that his friend Sir Duncan see me safe to Eastwatch. No recruit had arrived at the wall with so much pomp since Nymeria sent the watch 6 kings in golden fetters. Egg emptied out the dungeons too, so I would not need to say my vows alone. My honour guard, he called them. One was no less a man than Brynden Rivers. Later, he was chosen Lord Commander. So that journey to Eastwatch that seemed so odd now seems even more odd, if it were just some prisoners and a Maester being sent up there. We're told elsewhere that it was 200 new members of the Night's Watch in one go, most of whom were trained soldiers fiercely loyal to Bloodraven. That's a big block vote. It's no real surprise that Bloodraven was made Lord Commander when there was next a vote on it. The vote was stacked in his favour. It all sounds a lot more serious and significant a moment than it first comes across as, and perhaps adds yet another layer to what Aemon said to Egg as he left. Egg was 33 when the Great Council chose him to mount the Iron Throne, a man grown with sons of his own, yet in some ways still a boy. Egg had an innocence to him, a sweetness we all loved. "Kill the boy within you," I told him the day I took ship for the wall. "It takes a man to rule, an Aegon, not an Egg. Kill the boy, and let the man be born." That's Aemon basically telling Egg that he needs to grow up. Things are about to get serious. He needs to take on responsibility. Aemon left Egg and went to the wall, not just because he thought people might use him to get at Egg. I doubt many people who knew them both thought that would be possible. He also didn't go because he thought Egg didn't need him. The last thing he said to Egg was telling him to grow up. He went to the wall because he thought that was his place, prophetically speaking, because Bloodraven was going, because winter had come, and just maybe time was short. When the cold winds blow from the north, where should Targaryens who care about their role in saving humanity go? To the wall. Aemon didn't go to the wall to evade threats in King's Landing. He went because he thought that's where the real war was going to soon start. Next time, we'll see what Aemon got up to while he was there. If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos, please click on the link on the left of your screen. Or if you'd like to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.